Hey guys, Julian here, and today I'm super excited to be showing you how to make classic Detroit style house in the style of Moodymann. So as usual, you get the project file and samples from this video in the description, and if you're a patron on my Patreon, check there, because they'll be available shortly. And yeah, let's get started. So this is a loop you heard in the intro. We're at 124 BPM, and the first sound we have here is this sort of key thing, which sounds like this. So this was made using Operator. It's a pretty simple FM kind of sound. I'm going to show you the notes first. So these are the three chords it's playing. It's playing this F sharp minor ninth, A minor ninth, and then E minor 9. And then what's going on here is, like I said, these are just basic minor ninth chords. So like, we've got that. I've elected to make these all minor, which isn't exactly musically perfect, but it gives you that really classic sound, because what was happening a lot with these older tracks is people would just take like a chord stab, like they would just have like literally an audio recording of like a minor chord or a major chord sometimes, or a minor ninth, or whatever kind of chord it was, but they would take a stab like that. And Moodymann as well, I hear this a lot in his music, and just kind of transpose it up and down the keyboard. So like you would play this chord progression, but it would just be using that stab. And so I was trying to recreate that sound. So like I could make these, perfectly work like this. But you can hear that doesn't really have that same kind of like classic sound, so that's why they're all minor. And then for the voicing on these chords, it might look a little confusing as well. Basically what I've done here is I've taken, these are the basic chords, the notes that I highlighted before. I've just taken those, and then I've doubled up the fifth and the root note down an octave. So you can see we have the fifth here, F sharp of this first chord, and then we've got the root note, C sharp for the fifth, and then F sharp is the root. But yeah, so pretty simple there. It just makes it a bit deeper and kind of more like interesting sounding. So for the sound on this one, I made it using Operator, like I said. And what we've got going on here is I've got just 3 sine waves doing some FM. You can see I've kind of set the envelopes like this, so it's sort of not like a pluck, but it's more of like a keys kind of sound again, where it's sort of like you hit it and then like it rings out for a pretty good amount of time, but it's not just like endless. So yeah, so that's really what's going on there. And then you can see I've also got like the chorus pitches kind of, moved around here. So I've got like this one at 2, this one at 6. And that kind of helps with the FM as well. If I turn those back to 1, you can hear it's not quite the same sound. So those really help for getting that kind of like Rhodesy, sort of like electronic piano kind of sound out of it. After that, I've got a phaser, which is set like this. You can see I've got the dry wet at 100%, and then I've got the frequency and the feedback there, and then I've got the LFO moving it. So that's what's giving it that kind of phaser sound. It's the phaser. Then after that, I've got an echo, which is set like this. You can see I've got the left and the right ear. I've got them unsynced, so they're just on milliseconds, and then I've got the dry wet there. So this is just adding a bit of space and kind of some dimension to the sound. I also have this reverb after that, which is doing a very similar thing. You can see, same thing here. Not a whole lot, like it's not a super long reverb, and there's not a whole lot of the wet signal coming through, but it's just adding a bit more space to the sound. So then after that, I have a compressor side chaining it to the kick, and then an EQ8 cutting out the low end, and that is it for the keys. So the next thing that we have here is this huge group, which I've called the rhythm bus, which altogether sounds like this. And so you can imagine the reason why this is called the rhythm bus is because I have the entire rhythm section in here. And so I'm going to come back and talk about this group overall in a little bit, and I'll kind of explain why I've done all this, but I'm going to go through the individual layers one by one first. So I've also got the second group inside of here, this percussion group. It's just basically everything that is in the kick and the bass. And yeah, I've got a bit of group processing on there, and then I've got the individual things from there that I will show you. So the first thing we have here is this drum rack, which sounds like this. So this just has these 2 rim shots here, and then these are just kind of like alternating. If I play this with the hi-hat, you will, It's just those little kind of percussions in there. And then the only thing with this is, like I said, I just have these two samples and I'm kind of bouncing between them. I like to use two different samples because it can get kind of repetitive if it's just one. And I feel like it's kind of distracting when that happens. So yeah, it's nice to kind of have the two sort of playing off of each other. Next thing I have here is the snare / clap, which sounds like this. So this is 2 layers. We have the snare, sort of like a rim shot, kind of like punchy, very fast and tight snare. And then we have this clap, which is kind of more of like a soft, sort of like smooth hand clap. But you can hear when you play them together, they give you that really nice kind of like crunchy, sort of like old school sounding clap. Then after that, I've got the tambourine, which sounds like this. So all this is just a tambourine sample, and then you can see I've got this pattern here that I programmed in. Another thing I will note is you can see the swing here. This is pretty much in everything that has 16th notes in it. Basically, I've just taken all of these 16th notes, like in this case, it's all of these ones, and obviously all the ones over here, and then I've just moved them back a little bit, and that gives it this kind of like swing. If I quantize those, you can hear it's a lot more like rigid and kind of like techno sounding, which can be good in some cases. But if you're trying to get like soulful, kind of more groovy house, definitely important to get that swing on there. So then the last thing that we have inside of the percussion group is this hi-hat, which sounds like this. So it's just kind of like this sort of punchy, kind of tight hi-hat sample. And I've just got it in here, and you can hear I've got this little thing going here where I've got like that second one, and the velocity is a lot quieter, and it's swung. And so it's kind of like instead of just being like. And I feel like that makes it like a little bit more kind of fit into the groove. If I turn those notes off, you can hear. It's not quite the same. It feels a little bit more like garagey almost. So that is it for the individual sounds inside of the percussion group. On the actual group, I've got a few effects. So the first thing I've got is just this drum bus, which is set like this. So you can see I'm just using the drive and the crunch. I've got that on medium, and I've turned the crunch up a little bit. And I'm just using this to give it a bit more grit and kind of like put some saturation on everything. You can hear when I turn it off, nothing really sounds as nice as when we've got the same kind of saturation, adding that same kind of texture over top of everything. And then after that, I just have an EQ8 cutting out the low end. Pretty simple stuff there, just kind of cleans it up. None of these sounds really need to have any low end, so yeah. So then the next thing that we've got here is the kick, which sounds like this. So, what we got going on with this kick here is we have this kick, and then we have this little one underneath it. So, I'll talk about this briefly, just to get it out of the way. This little kick underneath it is just playing those little accent notes. Like when I want it to go doom, 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 doom. Or over here where it goes like. So, the reason why I have the second one here is, for one, it's pitched up a little bit. You can hear from the other one. But also, everything is actually being sidechained to this main kick. And so what happens is, when you have it play, like, for example, 2/8 notes, like if I have it do like that there, what happens is, then everything that's being sidechained to it gets ducked out of the way, and it just gets kind of annoying, and it doesn't sound that good. So that's part of the reason why I have the second one. And then again, another reason for it is because it's tuned up a little bit higher, so it helps to differentiate when you have those little 8th notes there and stuff. So for the main kick, I will show this to you. Basically, all it is just this kick sample. That one, and I've just brought it in here, and I pitched it down a little bit, I shortened it with an amplitude envelope, and that's really it. You really, for this style, you just want like a big kind of punchy kick that works really well with the bass. And isn't like too hard, but it still punches through the mix, and it's still like really hitting and keeping the groove. And then for the second one, again, it's the same kick. I've got the same processing on it on both of these. I just have this drum bus with a bit of drive, a bit of crunch, a bit of the boom as well. Helps to kind of beef up the low end a little bit. I've got the decay down, and I've tuned it to the key, which is F sharp. And yeah, really pretty simple there for the kick. So the last thing before I show you the group processing is this bass, which sounds like this. So the way I made this was just basically by following the chord progression. You can see it's playing F sharp, and then A, and then E, the same root notes as the chords. And then I've just got these kind of accent notes, which are all just notes like in the key. Like, for example, here we've got this, that note there, it's just F sharp an octave up. And then here, for example, we've got B, which would be the fifth of E. And then this note is A, so I guess that also works. But yeah, again, it's just kind of taking like the chord progression, and you can hear just kind of making this pattern underneath it that really like drives everything. Like this bass line, I feel like does a pretty good job of really driving the rhythm of this track. Especially because it's a little bit slow, to be honest with you. Like we just have these keys up here, which are kind of like sparsely playing. We've got the string sample. But when I'm bringing the bass, it's like very driving, and that's what I was going for there. So then for the sound on this one, I made it using operator. What we've got here is just this kind of like, I was going for like a bass guitar type of sound. So basically, it's just 3 sine waves doing a bit of FM. You can see, yeah, really nothing too crazy there. I've just kind of got these. I've turned the chorus pitch on the second one down an octave, which you can hear makes a pretty big difference. That's what I feel like helps to really give it like the live bass kind of sound. So yeah, then after that, I've just got a compressor, side chaining it to the kick, and then I have this EQ8. And with this EQ8, I was just trying to cut out around like 200 hertz because that's kind of where the kick is. And if I turn this off, you can hear the bass is happening a lot there as well, and I just felt like it was kind of messy. So yeah, that just kind of cleans it up and makes a little bit of room for the kick. So then on this rhythm bus processing, so like I said, I've got all the rhythm section, the drums, and the bass in the same group and being processed the same, and there are a few reasons why I'm doing this. For one, when you put processing on like a group of things, I talk about this a lot, but when you put processing on a group of things like this, what happens is it helps to put them all in the same kind of world sonically. Like it helps to sort of give them all the same texture and make them all kind of fit together more. And the reason for this is because you're putting the same effect on them. Like you're putting literally the exact same effect on everything, and because they're all getting kind of coated with a similar flavoring or the similar sort of coloring, yeah, they all just tend to have a really similar sound, or have kind of like a sound like they're in the same world sonically speaking. And then the other reason for it is really, truth be told, I think it's just more efficient. Like if you're going to put a bit of compression and a bit of saturation on these things, why not just put it on everything and kind of like, again, make it a lot more cohesive. And it works really well for the style. You also have to keep in mind, like, a lot of the time back in the day, making a lot of these classic sort of house tracks, they didn't have all of the sort of modern luxuries we have now with producing. Like, they weren't able to go in and, like, you know, really tweak every little detail like we can now. So a lot of times, this is just how it was done. Like, they would just put effects on things. Or even, like, if you were putting a lot of the same stuff onto a tape, or, yeah, onto, like, some tape or something like that, you know, that's gonna give it all the same kind of, like, coating and sonic flavoring like I was talking about. So, yeah, I think it's just a really good technique for this style, and it really helps to, like, glue the rhythm section together. So, here is without any of this. You can hear it's very flat and dry. And then when I start bringing it in, it really helps to bring it to life. So the first thing I've got on here is just this compressor, which is set like this. You can see it's not kicking in a whole lot. I'm just using it to sort of flatten out those like very high peaks and make it just a little bit flatter. Like again, we're not trying to completely squash it like that, but like just a little bit on those very top peaks. I feel like it really helps to glue everything together. Here's without it, and then with it. So yeah, just kind of bringing it to life. I've also turned the attack and the release up a little bit as well on that. Then after that, I've got this drum bus, which is set like this. You can see I've got the drive up a bit, I've got the crunch up a bit, and yeah, it's just kind of adding a bit more, like, texture to everything. And yeah, that's pretty much it for the rhythm bus. So then the last thing I've got here is the string sample, which sounds like this. So the way I made this was by taking the string sample, and I've just put it into here, and then I'm looping it. And what I'm doing with this loop is I'm using the fade. So if you don't know how to use this fade to make kind of like a smooth loop, basically I'll explain why. So if I turn this off, you can hear it loops, but every time it restarts, you hear like a little click there. But when I turn on this fade, it makes like a smooth loop. So that's the purpose of the fade. And the way that you use it is basically by changing the start and length time. You have to just kind of shorten the sample with those. It doesn't work if you just drag the markers over here. But yeah, you just kind of shorten it with that. And then once you do that, you can turn on the fade. So that's how I did that. And it's a really good way to make like a seamless sort of endless loop of a sound like this. So it'll just play on forever really smoothly. So, yeah, that's really it for that sound and simpler, nothing too crazy. After that, I've got a bit of reverb. You can hear it's just adding some space to the sound and kind of giving it that, like, reverby sort of texture. It's a nice polish that kind of, like, yeah, adds a lot to the sound. So then after that, I've got a compressor, side chaining it to the cake, and then finally I just have an EQ8 cutting out the low end, because there was actually kind of, like, a weird amount of low end in this. Like, you wouldn't expect it. So I've just kind of cut that out with that EQ8. And yeah, that's pretty much it for this one. That's all the different sounds. I hope you guys enjoyed. And yeah, so that's gonna be it for today, guys. As always, make sure to let me know what you think of this video in the comments, and make sure to like this video as well as subscribe. Once again, you can get the project file and samples from this video in the description, and if you're a patron on my Patreon, check there because they will be available shortly. Thank you so much, everybody. All the support lately has been amazing. I love you all, and I will see you tomorrow with another video.